How are you all doing? So Ruby says I have you for about 3 hours. Right, Ruby? Yeah, okay. So last time I gave a talk at a festival, I was at Burning Man dressed in a gorilla suit. So this is a little bit of change. So normally I use slides, and so I'm going to use this as a reference, but we're going to do some interaction. So I'm going to be looking down at my notes from time to time. So what's my aim? So my aim is that I want to talk about education, but I'm actually going to talk about children, but actually I'm going to talk about you. I'm going to talk about our brain. I'm going to talk about what it is to be human. And by the end of it, I want you to know less than you know now. All right? Because nothing interesting begins with knowing. Right? It begins with not knowing at the most fundamental level. And I want you to not know and let go of what you thought to be true before, because that's actually the seed of creativity. And that's actually, in some sense, what we actually teach our children in the school that we're, for instance, creating in Somerset. Okay? And I also want to prepare you to go to the very place that your brain evolved to avoid, which again is that not knowing. I thought that was mine. Okay, so we're also creating spaces of learning, my lab of misfits, and one of them is a school in Somerset, and I'll only make reference to that at the end. So what is the fundamental challenge that your brain evolved to solve? What's the fundamental challenge that your children's brains, if you have children, evolved to solve? This is actually the fundamental challenge that every living system evolved to solve. What is it? How to survive. Yes, true.
Who are they?
Sorry?
Who are they?
Who are they? That's interesting. Yeah. Who am I? Who are they as well?
To reproduce.
Change, right? To reproduce, yes. To survive up to the point of reproduction. How do we do that? Because our brain evolved to deal with change. Change is the fundamental challenge that every brain evolved to solve. In fact, every living system evolved to solve. And change in nature is actually nonlinear. A small input will create a massive effect. Okay? So think about an avalanche. You add the small weight of a skier, and the whole thing gives way. Which means life doesn't just change, life is deeply unpredictable. We have no idea what tomorrow will be. Okay? So, how many of you, when you were 10 years old, predicted where you are right now? And I don't mean at medicine festival, right? But in who you're married to, or who your partner is, or whether or not you have children, right? How many of you predicted exactly what you were going to be? No one. Anyone come close? That they wanted to be an artist or a scientist? Yeah, what was yours? You want to be a doctor. Did you become a doctor? Oh, okay. Did you become the doctor that you thought you would?
Yes.
Ah.
But now I know I want to be something else.
Now you want to be something else. And that was probably unpredictable. And do you know what that something else is?
It is a different kind of healing medicine, but still in healing.
Healing and medicine. We'll talk a bit about healing. What actually is healing? And how does your brain heal? It's a fascinating question. I don't have the answer, but I have a couple of questions. So the fact is, it was impossible to predict where you are now. And which means that everything about your life going forward is unknowable. We have no idea whether the decisions you make right now are going to be good or bad. You can make reasonable decisions, but you have no idea if they're going to be a good decision or a bad decision. Okay? Which means that we're actually educating young people for a world that doesn't actually exist. And that's one of the fundamental challenges of education, is prepare them for their world. The problem is we're using strategies and knowledge based on the past. The assumption being that what worked in the past will continue to work in the future. What worked yesterday will again work tomorrow, which is a brilliant idea if it weren't for the fact that the world changes. Okay? So the world is unknowable, and we're educating kids for a world that doesn't exist, and yet we teach them what to see, not how to look. Right? And then we grade them on how well they actually saw what we told them to see. Okay? So we also set up education for 30% of children to fail automatically. Right? So there are 30% of children who will enter education and they will fail. The system is designed to fail them because of the way of the assessments. Right? So the deep question then is, how do we create education? How do we create spaces even festivals, that empower people to thrive in a world that doesn't yet exist. Whether that be a child, an adult, or the relationship between them. Okay, so the strategy typically is that we think that if we just change with change, that will be enough, but it's not. To change with change is not enough. That's just like Brownian motion. Something happens and you change. You're constantly responding to life, but not actually taking agency over life. So to change with change is not enough. Those who do well in the world, and I mean, depends on how you define well, but those who live with well-being, those who have wisdom, those who succeed, those who respond better to life, do better in life. So it's how you respond to life, and that's actually whether or not you make a decision that's good or bad. So if you have an opportunity to go somewhere, say you go to New York for work, right? You have no idea whether that's going to be a good decision, but you're going to go, and how you respond to that change will determine whether it's a good decision. So if after a year you were energetic, you made friends, etc., you look back and say, well, that was a good decision. The answer is, it wasn't. You made it a good decision by how you responded to it. Whereas if you stay in bed, you feel low, etc., and you said, well, that was a crap decision, the answer is, it wasn't. You made it a bad decision by how you responded to it. So the choices we make change the environment, change the ecology, and then create the opportunity for which to respond to that change. And how you respond will determine whether or not you do well. So our inability to respond well is why our bodies fail. It's why we fail mentally. It's also why our relationships fail. Okay? And what it means to respond well is actually to evolve. And what does it mean to evolve? It means to complexify. Okay? To increase the diversity and find that interesting interconnection between that diversity. You become a more complex person. That's what it is to evolve. That's what it is to respond well. So it's like going from a line where you can only go forward and backward, or you're on a plane and you go forward, backward, right or left, or you're a cube and now you go up, down, right, left, forward, or backward. Okay? Every time you add a degree of freedom, you increase your complexity, you increase your ability to respond well to change. That's what it is to evolve. Okay? So the problem is that almost everybody focuses in the wrong place. And this could be education itself. This could be people who are doing self-help, coaches, gurus, right? Relationship coaches. They all focus on the wrong place. But it's an obvious place. It's a deeply understandable reason why they focus there, which is on the response, because how you respond will shape your success. So of course we're going to focus on how we respond and try to take agency in how we respond. So how many have ever, got angry or have angry issues? No one? Yes? Oh, thank goodness, right? So, and they say, just breathe, right? Just breathe. Count to 10, right? They're trying to focus on that response. The problem is, it's too late. You've already responded, okay? So I call it the dimmer switch strategy. It's just, could you just take that response? Could you just turn it down a little bit, right? So don't get rid of it, just turn it down. Just maybe hold it in, right? That would be great, right? So we try to turn it down. The problem is it's already happened. In fact, the reason why we shouldn't focus on that place is your brain has no free will in the moment. Everything you're doing right now is already a reflex. Everything you're doing is a reflex from, just like when the doctor hits your patellar tendon and your leg jumps out. Everything your brain is doing is a reflex. And I'm going to give you an example of how reflexive your brain is. So I need someone to come up. Do you mind coming up? Yeah. All right. What's your name? Ed. Ed. Okay. Can everyone see Ed? Yep. All right, Ed. I can't go in front of the speaker, but I can go here. Okay, so you can hear okay? Okay, good. All right, so we'll do a test on that. All right, so I'm going to put this helmet on. Oh, no, I don't need a mic yet, I think. All right, so I'll face the audience, all right? This will be on social media shortly. Okay, now, I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to point in the direction you hear me clap. Okay? over there. That's confusing. All right, just here. All right. All right, open your eyes. Okay, good. You're good. All right, now we're going to close this down. Okay, close your eyes, and I want you to point in the direction you hear me clapping again, okay? Open your eyes. All right, now keep your eyes open. Focus forward. Where do you hear it clapping from? There. He knows where it's coming from, right? But he can't help but hear it in the opposite direction, right? Because your brain is reflexive. This is like, our education system. We're telling him, I'm over here, but he actually hears it from over there. He can't help it because our brain is a reflex. It's been wired this way. What this is doing, this is called the ear switcher. So the way we determine space of this orientation, location of this orientation, is if something comes from here, it hits our right ear before it hits our left, and your brain calculates that small time difference and uses that time difference to do location. This is actually switching it. So it's hitting, something on the right hits his left ear first, and then it hits the right. Okay? But notice that even that he knows it, it doesn't change his perception. Because our perception is reflex. Thank you so much. All right, so, which also means I can read your mind. All right? So I'm going to read your mind. I want you to maybe close your eyes. I want you to imagine two shapes. One shape like a wire, like a black line drawing, right, on a piece of paper. I want you to imagine one shape is kind of like multiple sharp points, almost like a star, maybe 6 or 7 points. Yes, you got that in your mind? Okay. Now, I want you to imagine another shape which has rounded edges, maybe like a cloud, also in black marker. You got that? Okay, now I'm going to read your mind. Okay, I'm going to give you two sounds, completely meaningless sounds. The first one is kiki, meaningless word, right? Doesn't mean anything. And the second one is boo-boo. All right? Now, you independent, free-thinking people, tell me which of those shapes is kiki, which has no name, and which of those shapes is boo-boo? How many of you said the sharp shape is kiki, and the rounded shape is boo-boo? Right? I read your mind. Do you know why you're doing this? No. It's because we're so blind to ourselves, right? We will do these things, and you're all doing it, and yet none of you know why you're doing it. So, any guesses? Shape of the letters. Okay, fair enough. Okay, let me give you two other words. Oh, yeah.
Bubble is like boo-boo reminded me of bubble, which is very round and soft.
Okay, round and soft. Okay, a bubble. Sounds like a sharp shape. Okay, great hypotheses. We're doing science here. So let's now give you two more words. Love and hate. Which of those shapes is love and which is hate? How many of you say the sharp shape is hate and the rounded shape is love, depending on the state of your relationship? Okay? We could do a little experiment on that. How many people say it's just the opposite? Okay, so why is that? It's because if I prick your finger and I say hate, I activate the same parts of your brain, which is pain. Hate is painful. Your brain has encoded the meaning of information, not information. You're comparing meaning unconsciously. So if I give you the word odio, thinking about the idea of a rounded shape, if I give you the word odio, how many people say it's the rounded shape? Unless you're a Spanish speaker. Because odio means hate. Rounded sound meaning hate, and so Spanish speakers will say that's sharp. Okay? So all of that was reflexive, and all of that you all came into the world with. So I'm reading your mind based on your evolutionary history. So our brains, again, do not have free will in the moment. In fact, the conscious part of your brain is active after the unconscious part of your brain. So if I say to you, what I want you to do is all stand up, and I want you to just jump around. Ready, set, go. All right? Jump around. All right? You free will people. Now sit down. Right? Not only did you do exactly as I told you to do, right? But the part of your brain that was active to the jumping was active before the conscious part of your brain that says, I'm jumping. So your consciousness is actually happening after the fact. But it tells your brain that it's the other way around, that my consciousness caused the jumping. In fact, I caused your jumping. Right? So, what's the solution then? If your success, your livelihood, your well-being is determined by how well you respond to a world that's changing, and yet you have no free will in the moment of your responses, how can you actually alter your response to the world? And the answer is actually, and this is the fundamental point, it's how you enter life that matters. It's how you enter that determines how you're going to respond. How you enter a moment will determine how you respond to that moment. If you change how you enter, you will change how you respond. And that you have agency over. You have agency over how you enter. I'll give you some intuitive examples. Imagine you're in a situation and you can enter angrily or you can enter with gratitude. Now we could probably all agree that how you respond to that situation will be different depending on how you enter. Yes? Or you can enter closed or open. Or you can enter with arrogance or humility. Changing how you enter will change how you respond to the situation. The situation doesn't itself dictate any specific response. You change your response by changing how you enter. Which is one reason why many people advocate making your bed in the morning. Right? Why? Because they're trying to set your brain, put it into a brain state of entering the rest of the day with agency. They're preparing you for the rest of your day. But there are some ways of entering that are better than others. Not all ways of entering are the same. So, I'll give you an example. So there was an experiment done in the 60s and 70s where you had this, the game is a game, and you had a block, you had all these blocks on the floor, and the game was to build the tower as fast as possible, as tall as possible. And they had a number of groups. One group was children, one was architects, one was engineers, one was the parents, okay? And who do you think won? Everyone says the kids, and you're right, right? And so why? Because they entered in a certain way, which we're going to talk about, but they entered and they just tried and then it failed and they tried again. The engineers said, right, brilliant, okay, whiteboard, right? They started writing equations and figured it out and then it didn't work, okay? So they entered the situation completely different. And so another example is that the best, what we call initial conditions in physics, the best way to enter is relational. It's how you enter in terms of relationships. How you are entering is a relationship, whether that relationship be with yourself, with the world, or with another person. And how you enter a relationship will determine how you respond to it. So the initial conditions, the way of entering, are determined by that, the quality of that relationship. Okay? And what it's doing is preparing you for the unpredictable. And that's what how you entering is matters. So for instance, my mom is 88 years old. She has stage 4 Parkinson's disease. Okay? So, which means that if she is to fall, and she's fallen a couple of times, a couple of years ago, but if she falls now and breaks something, her probability of death is 50% in the next 12 months. Okay, this is just what's true for her. Which means every step she takes is literally life or death. And yet she takes steps all the time, right? She is choosing to enter with that courage. And we had reference to courage before. We're going to build on that theme. Okay, so when her physiotherapist comes, and I was there visiting her and helping her out, and the physiotherapist has her standing in front of the sofa, and he has a belt around, and he's holding onto the belt, and he's pushing her. And she's falling like this, right? And my mom has a phrase that you might like, which is you have to walk through life with a tilt. Okay? Why? So she's very tilted. Okay? Why? Because she says walking through life is like walking into the wind. If you walk standing straight up, you get blown over. So you have to lean into life with a tilt. And what is to be tilted is with humor. Right? To be able to see things differently. So My mom's there, she's laughing away, and he's pushing her. I said, what's going on here? He says, the reality, Beau, is that I'm not trying to teach her how to walk in balance. Because at some point she's going to stumble. That's inevitable. What I'm trying to do is prepare her for that inevitable moment in which she stumbles. I'm preparing her to enter that moment with agility and flexibility. Okay? That's what the physiotherapist is. Right? And so, again, how you enter is about being prepared. I'll give you a counter example. Okay? Abby and I live not far from Bristol. That's the airport we use. And I was flying off to a talk somewhere, and having you been to Bristol Airport, a bit of a night. Actually, it doesn't matter, because security, the security line where you go through and you've got this sort of like going back and forth, and you get to the end. You've all experienced this, yes? Okay, in this particular instance, there was no one there except one couple. He was in his late 80s and she was probably in her mid 80s, and they were just in front of me, and they were walking down like this, right? He was really struggling. And they had about 6 or 7 laps to go. So I said to the security guy, I said, do you think we could just let them through? And he said, no, they have to walk. Right? Okay. So there they go, they walk, and they do one another. I said, really? Could we not let them through? There's no one in front. And he says, no, they have to walk. So they do another lap. Right? And then he comes to the security. I said, really? Could we not let them through? And he pauses, and he says, and he opens up the little rope, and he lets the gentleman through, and then he closes it, and he doesn't let his wife through. Right? And she has to walk all the way. Right? So he was actually, in some sense, a brilliant employee. He was doing exactly as he was told. He was very efficient. But he couldn't adapt to a changing world. He couldn't see context. Right? He wasn't what I call evolvable. How we respond to life well is to evolve. But you can never evolve if you're not first evolvable. If you're not prepared to evolve. And that's what we need to do, not only with ourselves, but also with our children. To prepare them to be evolvable. The beauty of it is that they came into the world with all the skills necessary to be evolvable. And we hear a lot about the idea of mindset, etc. This is actually a way of being. It's more than just your mind. It's your whole body. It's how you live your life. And not just sometimes, not just at festivals. It's every day, especially when things are difficult. This is a way of being in the world. How you enter life is a way of being. So, and what's more, there's another word that people use often, which is transformation. So my lab actually looks at the biology of transformation, going from, say, for instance, a caterpillar to a butterfly. That's true transformation. Not just something going from small to large, right? But true transformation. And where in physics and in nature do you see transformation? It's by changing your initial conditions. Right? If you change that one thing, everything else will change. So if you change from, say, arrogance to gratitude, everything changes. So if you change how you enter, that's truly how you can transform immediately and sustainably. But some ways of being are just simply better than others. Okay? And the beautiful thing about it is that you actually came into the world with these, what I call the 10 C's, the 10 skills that your brain has to be evolvable. Your children came into the world with these things. The problem with the current education system is that we don't actually exercise these brain skills that empower children to evolve in the face of change, which we have actually, in some sense, are diminished in this regard because they haven't been exercised, or they've been exercised in the wrong way. So what are these 10 things? I'm just going to shout them out, but we're going to go through 4 of them. I think 4 that are particularly important. First one's conscious, to enter every moment conscious with awareness, not just reflexes. Critical, as in critical thinking. To be calm, especially in the moment of chaos. Because if you're not calm, you go to panic. Okay, so when you enter with calm, it means your prefrontal cortex is kicking in, and now you can have agency in that moment. With courage, to be courageous. The last speaker made reference to courage. I'm not interested in confidence in schools. If you're doing something with confidence, you already know what's going to happen. But when you enter with courage, You don't know what's going to happen. My daughter, when she was a dancer, right? She was about to go on stage. She said, "Dad, this is really scary. This could be awful. This could be a disaster." I said, "You're absolutely right. It could be a disaster. But what's amazing is that you're doing it anyway, right? That's courage." So another one is curious. To be curious, to be asking questions, to be caring. What is it that you care about? Because you're not going to ask questions if you don't actually care, right? To be compassionate. Compassionate towards self, towards others, towards the world, to realize that beauty is not perfection, beauty is imperfection, right? Beauty is movement. Things that stand still in nature die, right? To be alive is to move, to evolve, right? Connected. That all of us are necessarily connected. This whole idea that you have independence, independence in relationships, what a silly idea. That is literally impossible. None of you are independent. Okay, you might like to think you are, but none of you are independent. We're all dependent. Quite literally. Okay? So, and commitment, and finally, complete. We're going to talk about complete. Actually, I'll start with complete. No, I'll come to complete. We'll come to complete in the end. Okay, so these are the 10 skills that your brain already has. You don't have to learn these. But what you have to do is learn how to practice them and to create a context for you and yourself and your partners, your relationships, to actually exercise them. Okay? And these are the skills that our education program in our school are actually actively teaching the children. We're going to be assessing them in their level of curiosity, their level of compassion. Because our argument is, yes, you need to know history, yes, you need to know math, but you need to be curious. You need to care, you need to have courage. Okay? And I'm going to focus on 4 of them: consciousness, courage, curiosity, and care. So we'll just fly through these. Conscious. Why is consciousness important? Right? Really, it's about power of awareness. So you don't have agency unless you have an awareness. Right? You don't have a choice until you know you have one. So I'm going to give you an example about power of awareness. There was an experiment done with groups of cleaners, hotel cleaners. We had 2 groups, and one group, cleaners of hotels, for instance, they're incredibly physically active. Their activity is actually very good for their body. Okay, very hard work. And so they took one group and they gave them awareness about the power of the movement on their well-being, their physical and emotional well-being. The other group, they gave them awareness that was like awareness of architecture or something. Okay? And then they looked at the physical capacity of the 2 groups after 1 month. They both had the same level of movement, but one of them did with awareness of the impact of their mind and their body. As a consequence, the first group actually had better VO2 max, their heart rate level dropped, they lost more weight. Their physical activity didn't change, but the awareness of the impact of it did. Okay? So awareness is essential. You can't evolve if you're not aware that your brain can evolve. There's another study showing that those who are certain that they can't change, don't. Those who are certain that they can change, at least try. Okay? So the beautiful thing is that your brain evolved to evolve. It's adapted to adapt. Your brain is constantly changing. It's changing right now, hopefully for the better. Right? Your brain evolved to match the complexity of its world. Why? Because 20% of the energy you just consumed at breakfast goes to 2% of your body mass. Thinking is expensive, which is why so few people do it. It's literally expensive. And to think differently, you're actually growing brain tissue. It's incredibly expensive organ. Far easier to not think, to just be reflexive. And we're going to talk about that in a bit, right? But if you increase the complexity of this world, your brain's like, oh shit, and then it will actually increase its own complexity. And a more complex brain is a more adaptable brain, a more resilient brain, a more agile brain, a more compassionate brain, right? Because that brain can actually see things from multiple perspectives. And by the way, psilocybin increases the complexity of your brain. I just thought I'd throw that in. That's what a brain cells look like, literally, from a deprived brain and an enriched brain. My mentor at Berkeley many, many years ago, Marion Diamond, wonderful individual, she was the first person to do these studies, to raise rats in more complex or less complex environments. And she discovered that, again, your brain evolved to match the complexity of the world. What she also demonstrated, very few people know, that if you do an over-enriched environment, your brain atrophies. The brain in an over-enriched environment looks like the one from the deprived environment. You can do too much. But what's too much for one person is different for another person. Okay? So for rats, or for us, to find social, things to play with, diversity, right? This whole idea that, multicultural diversity, of course, diversity, for a biologist, diversity is essential to our well-being. It's the engine of evolution, right? We have to have diversity, but what many people forget is you actually have to have integration across that diversity. A simply diverse space is a stressful space, right? You need that integration, which is actually what your sleep-wake cycle is doing. When you're awake, you're creating diversity, and while you're sleeping, your brain is then unconsciously integrating across that diversity, which is why you often wake up with ideas, right? Or you wake up with ideas in the shower, or you wake up ideas when things are calm, and people say, oh, what I really need to do is just be calm even more. It's like, no, you need that cycle. You need the stress and then the integration, right? And so you could argue that in some sense, that's the role of medicine. Right? Medicine actually is in a way to actually increase the awareness to your brain, the awareness of what's possible. Okay? But awareness by itself is only a first step. And many people get trapped in that first step because it's such a powerful feeling. And they keep having that awareness, and maybe even the same awarenesses. And they feel strongly, because to feel alive is to be alive. When we don't feel alive, we feel dead. And so we have that incredibly strong emotional response to it. It's like, I want that again and again. So we keep getting awareness, but we don't do the next step, which is to take agency and action on that awareness. Okay? And so you begin with awareness. You then have an attitude, an agency. I'm going to act on that awareness. And then you take action. And then you align what your action was aligned with your intention, and then you have accountability. I call it the 5 A's. Okay? And evolving begins with a question. And that evolving with a question begins with not knowing. And that's one of the C's, which is courage. Because you have to go to the very place your brain evolved to avoid, which is to not know. And the reality is, we hate not knowing. We hate I don't know. Don't we? Right? We hate I was wrong. Right? Why? Why do we do this? We all do. Why? Because dying was easy during evolution. If you weren't sure it was a predator, it was too late. Your brain evolved to take what is unknown and make it known. That's how you survive. It took what was unpredictable and tried to make it predictable. Your need to predict is actually the source of your anxiety, because you can't predict. Okay? And yet, we're constantly trying to put ourselves into a place of knowing. Step away from not knowing. And because we're evolved beings, and you're looking through the world through the eyes of your ancestors, when your ancestors are in that moment of not knowing, your cortisol levels increase, because that was a moment when their probability of death increased. Right? Your immune system starts degrading and dying. Your brain cells start dying. You actually become a more extreme version of yourself. If you're liberal, you become more liberal. If you're conservative, you become more conservative. Why? Because you go to a place of familiarity. Okay? So, as a consequence, we actually hold on to knowing. I call it the certainty trap. We trap ourselves in our certainty. One of the biggest challenges our society faces is our certainty. Right? That we project onto the world. We confuse my truth with the truth.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, that's really true.
And so we educate young people for certainty. We educate them with knowledge. Say, this is the way it is, and don't let it be any otherwise. And what's more, if you can repeat back to me what I just said, you get a high score in your A-levels. Brilliant, well done. Do you have any idea why that's true? No, doesn't matter. As long as you can repeat back to me what I just told you to know. Okay? So we trap ourselves in our certainty, which is one of the reasons why I have a tattoo here that says, I don't know. Right? And it's pointing up at me. And my children also have this tattoo, I don't know. I didn't tell them to, by the way. But we all got it together. I also have a question mark here. Why? Because again, nothing interesting begins with knowing. But I have to remind myself that I don't know. So do you know, have you ever heard of Ogilvy? Ogilvy was like the father of marketing. And so I recommend all of you doing this. Okay, he had a card in his pocket. And before he'd go into any business meeting in this case, but I hope it was every meeting in life, he'd pull it out and he'd read it. And on it was written, they might be right. Right? Wonderful. Okay, so we also reward mistakelessness, right? If you didn't make a mistake, brilliant, well done on you. Okay, we punish questions, right? One of the most dangerous things you can do in life is to ask why, which is why governments, etc., they try to block questions, right? Orwell said every joke is a small revolution. So every revolution begins with a joke. You mean it could be different. And that's a dangerous thing, which is why even in romantic relationships, you ask a question of your partner, and let's hope it's because you're curious, you'll get met with defense. It's like, why are you asking me that? What are you implying? It's like, I'm just curious. I kind of wanted to understand you. How can I understand you if I don't ask questions? Right? But we try to block questions. We penalize questions. Okay? We'll even change the data and obviously to fit with our underlying assumptions. So here's, I can't show you the video, it's here, but I want you to listen to this interview, okay? It's political, but its point is a deeper point than this. And I want you to listen to see how she responds to the questions according to her own assumptions.
Do you mind if I just ask you a few questions about things that Biden has done in his administration, and you can kind of give me your opinion on that? What did you think when Joe Biden suggested that COVID could be cured by shining a bright light inside the body?
It is very sad that Joe Biden is clearly a dementia patient.
Supposedly hit the body with a tremendous, whether it's ultraviolet or just very powerful light.
What do you think about Joe Biden saying that getting through the 80s without getting HIV was his own personal Vietnam?
Again, it's very sad, his mental capacity, and that is a very uneducated statement.
Okay, I'm so sorry. These are not, I got my notes mixed up. Can I ask you this question? Can we start over and me ask you what, okay. What did you think when Donald Trump suggested that COVID could be cured by shining a bright light into the body?
It depends what that technology is.
What's it to?
That's a broad spectrum because, you know, you have MRI machines and CT machines and infrared and different things. So it just depends the context of that.
What did you think of Donald Trump saying that getting through the 80s without getting HIV was his own personal Vietnam?
Right? So we look for data to confirm our beliefs without changing our beliefs. We hold on to our certainty and we look for data to confirm our certainty. Okay? So, some questions for you. And I just want to take 30 seconds for you just to think about these. You can write them down or whatever, but I just want you to think in your own minds, what are you certain about? Because we all behave as if you've got a lot of certainty. Right? We kind of have to, right? But what are you certain about? What would you never change? And what will you have the courage to let go of? What certainty would you be willing to let go of? And why? And what helps you to let go? What helps you to let go? And that comes to one of our other C's, which is curiosity. So there's a brain state that actually loves uncertainty. There's one place that you absolutely love it. You don't just tolerate, what's that? Play! Oh my goodness, well done! High marks. Okay. So there, it's play. That's why play evolved. Play is a brain state that empowers your brain to go to the very place it evolved to avoid. Because evolution says, we also have to innovate, we have to adapt. So we can't just have them be afraid of uncertainty. We also have to have them go there. So let's give them a brain state that empowers them to go there, and it's called play. Right? Play actually celebrates uncertainty. It's open to possibility. It's open to diversity. It's inherently cooperative, and it's what we call intrinsically motivating. 10 minutes. Okay, I thought I had 2 hours. Okay. So it's inherently motivating, okay? And it's what we call intrinsically rewarding. What's an intrinsic reward? An intrinsic reward, the reward is for doing the thing that you're doing. So the reward of play is play, okay? And that's evolution saying, that's important. We're going to give them this reward to perpetuate that thing continuing to happen. So that's what play is, all right? And it begins with awe and wonder. And so when we did experiments with Cirque du Soleil, we measured the brain activity and the behaviors of people before and after watching a Cirque performance. And we found that after a period of awe and wonder, it increased your pro-social behavior. You're more wanting to help other people. I'd argue it didn't diminish your ego, it expanded your ego to include others. You came to identify with people beyond yourself and things beyond yourself. It actually increased decreased your need for cognitive closure, enabled you to actually sit with uncertainty, and it actually increased your ability to take risk. In fact, you became better able at taking risks. And awe is actually not a thing of the world, it's a way of looking at the world. So one of my collaborators at NYU, when he says to me, when my students walk into a class, they fill me with awe and wonder, and I'm thinking, why? And he says, think about it. It's trillions of molecules all moving together and sitting down. I said, my God, if you see it that way, that's amazing, right? And Abby's my little guy. He's asleep right now, right? Everything is amazing to him, right? It's a way of looking at the world. It's not what you see, it's how you're looking. So I want you to just take 1 second, or just a few seconds, to say, because we think that we have to go see the galaxy, the Milky Way, or something amazing or grand experience on wonder. I would argue that actually you can see it on wonder everywhere. It's about finding the impossible in the common, right? So I want you to take 1 moment to see if you can identify one thing around you right now that is absolutely seemingly magical, seemingly impossible, but it's incredibly common. Can you find one thing? Yeah, what do you find? Trees. Your journal. Brilliant. Right? Why is that impossible? It's super common. Yes. I mean, the fact that every single tree actually has the DNA in there, we have no idea what's going to emerge from that interaction. The tree is actually a physical manifestation of the relationship to its environment, right? Which is completely unpredictable, and yet there's something common between that. Right? So I want you to we call it the awe journal, which is maybe every day find something that's incredibly common and find why it's impossible, seemingly impossible, okay? And ideally do that at the beginning of the day, okay? So playing with intention is actually the pedagogy of our education program, because play by itself has no intention. When you add intention to play, you get science, you get art, you get anything that is creative. Is play with intention. Finally, we're going to do with care, right? So those who actually have done a study on this, and those who, it was during the time of COVID, and those who actually in the pursuit of happiness found that was their reason, that's what they cared about, because some things are just better than others when it comes to moments of uncertainty. That those who are pursuing happiness had the most stress, the least creativity, right? During times of uncertainty, in this case, COVID. Those who pursue authenticity and meaningfulness actually found themselves being more creative, less stress, and more joy. So one of the worst ways to achieve happiness is to pursue it, right? Whereas if you pursue authenticity and meaning, it's because your brain is all about meaning. When you open your eyes and see the world, you're not seeing what's there, you're seeing the meaning of what's there. The other aspect is you need to think, what is it that you care about? And are you aligned in your actions about what you care about. So if you can, we all know what we're supposed to say, don't we? Everyone here already knows what they're supposed to say, right? We have words, we have wonderful intentions, but are your actions consistent with those words and intentions? Are you aligned? Right? Because if you're not, which is okay, but that's where the awareness comes in, that's what's going to decrease your well-being. We increase our well-being by feeling aligned and actually being aligned in our words, intentions, and actions. Because your brain is actually watching itself. Okay? And so when we're not aligned, so often we'll then change the circumstance to explain why we were not aligned. Well, it was because of her. It was because of him. It was because of the circumstance, which is why I'm not aligned. Okay? So this coordinate alignment actually increases your brain's effort and it decreases well-being. So now who needs to evolve? Okay? And it begins with you. Okay? Especially in times of uncertainty. So how many of you have sort of been to relationships therapists and all this kind of stuff, and it's wonderful, very important, but often they'll say, you know what, you're two oaks. You're two oak trees growing side by side, you're independent, and your roots are here, and your breath. That's a pathological idea, right? First of all, oaks don't naturally grow on their own. They grow in amongst others. But actually, the way your brain works is that love in relationships are much more like a whirlpool. A whirlpool physically exists, but it's the consequence of the interaction of the water molecules. Right? Love in relationships are a consequence of how you interact. And how you interact then emerges the culture of your relationship. You cannot create culture. Culture emerges and it represents the interaction between the elements just like a whirlpool does. So love is like a whirlpool. It physically exists. It has impact on the world. But it's an emergent consequence of how you interact. Right? Because our brains are infected by others. None of us, again, are independent. So, if I'm sitting with Johnny, let's say, and I give Johnny a sort of a warm cup of coffee, okay? And then you walk up, and let's say he's interviewing you, okay? And so, he has his questions, all that, and you walk away. What's your name? Sarah. And Sarah walks away, and I say, Johnny, tell me, what do you think of Sarah? He's more likely to give me warm words than if I had given him an ice glass of water, in which he describes Sarah in more cold terms. So his brain is being infected by just the temperature of what he's holding. Our brains infect other people, and we're infected by other people. Okay? Cynicism is contagious, but so too is laughter. In fact, only 3 people deep, by the way. So the fifth or sixth is not so much having an effect on you. So I'll give you an example. What happens if you enter conversations with negative words and a negative tone? Right? Some of us have a default towards negativity. And I want you to understand because your brain is listening to yourself. You'll utter something and your brain's listening. It's like, oh, okay. And it's listening to itself. So if you speak negative words, and I'm not saying this, by the way, is don't be negative. This is not like an American, hey, everything's wonderful. No, it's not, okay? Right? You have to actually, there's pain, there's suffering, etc. But the point here is to have agency in how you're using your words to yourself. So if you use negative words, it strengthens your pessimism and your defeatist thinking, makes it easier for your brain to default to the negative. It reinforces negative self-concept, okay? And increases your sense of inadequacy and helplessness. Okay. And I'm just talking very simple negative observations. Oh, that's a bit rubbish. Oh, if only they had a park there. Or what about, I'm not talking about big negative things here. Reduces your ability to see opportunities, solve problems, and it decreases your creativity. It triggers cortisol levels release. When you do it increasingly, it will increase potential for heart disease by using negative words, okay? It also decreases your luck. You become less lucky, right, by using negative words. What also happens is you have a tone. Your brain is also listening to your tone. 5 minutes. We're going to go, okay.
Because it's the big peace ceremony.
Oh, we got to get to there. Okay. So if you listen with a negative tone, if you're using a negative tone, then your brain activates your amygdala, which is your emotional center, increases your perception of fear, threat, and anger. You're more likely to perceive neutral situations as threatening. Okay? It triggers your own body's fight or flight response. It limits your cognitive ability, agility, etc. And it damages your relationships. All of that is happening to you while you are speaking. Okay? But all of those things also happen to the person who's listening to you. You're decreasing their creativity. You're increasing their cortisol release, even if you're not even talking about them. So your negative words and tones impact the other person as well as the other way around. So it's not about feeling love. It's about being loving. You can feel tremendous love, but be terrible at love, right? Whereas something who's loving is a skill, it's an action, okay? And it's how you're entering, okay? So, quick question. What would happen if both people in a relationship, and again, that could be a relationship with yourself, another, or the world, entered loving? They entered to give more than they receive. I don't mean one or the other, but both aimed to give more than they receive. Both people would actually receive more than they ever received before. Right? And it has to be a balance, by the way. Okay, so what needs to evolve? And it's your perception. Why? Because perception underpins everything it is to be you. You change behavior by changing perception. It's not just the colors you see or the words that you use, it's the clothes you wear, the people you follow. Everything begins with perception. And your brain evolves to see the meaning of information, not the information. And that's grounded in your assumptions. Okay? So, for sake of time, we're going to tell you that everything you're seeing is necessarily projected onto the world. This screen is not blue. The color could not be closer to you. Light exists, but it's not color. The color is literally inside your head projected outward. You're literally coloring the screen. Okay? And what you do to surfaces, you do to other people. We color other people. And we color them according to our assumptions, our biases that come from our experience. And we see that as the reality. So we project it onto other people. So the problem is not that you have assumptions. The problem is that they're invisible to you. Okay? Does anyone know why we have 2 taps in Britain? No? I mean, what a stupid idea. You burn your hands under one, you cool them off under the other. What a crazy idea, right? So try to find out why you have 2 taps, okay? Because the reason why you have 2 taps is because you had 2 taps before, and they had 2 taps, and you had 2 taps, right? It's because actually hot water was actually in a hot water tank was an open bathtub in the loft. It was dangerous to drink the hot water because you had mouse droppings and dust. So they separated the hot water from the cold. Right? We no longer have open bathtubs in the loft. Okay, but we still have 2 taps. Right? So I want to show you how if you change your perception, you can literally transform what you hear. So I just 3 more minutes, right? So here we go. We're going to play a sound, and I want you to notice you can hear it in 2 ways. You can hear it as brainstorm or green needle. Okay, you ready? Try to hear green needle. Now here's brainstorm. Brainstorm. Now hear brain needle. Right? That's literal transformation. You're hearing things completely differently depending on how you enter it. Okay? So I'm going to finish with just 2 ideas, right, to get you to transform your perception of something. Okay? One of which is your deficiency. Right? How many of you feel that you're deficient? Let's be honest. No one? Right? I think everyone feels they're deficient. How many of you think being deficient is a bad idea? Right? Okay, so I want to change your perception of this. Right? Blue, the little guy, his name's Blue, he's asleep. He is completely deficient. Right? He is a deficient adult. But he is a complete baby. He is beautiful in himself. But what makes him beautiful is his potential and his possibility. So I want to give you the metaphor of a seed. Think about the tree. A seed is a complete seed. We are all complete. But inherent in the seed and what makes it beautiful is its possibility to become the tree. That is part of being the seed. If we didn't have deficiency, we could not evolve. We would not be evolvable. So Blue is a complete seed. He's a beautiful, complete baby. But part of that is his ability inherent in him to become something beyond what he is now. So that's how we can actually change the meaning of something. That can literally transform your subsequent behavior according to how you perceive deficiency. Okay? And so finally, when should you do this? When can you practice? Who is you? Right? What you need to evolve is your perception, but when? And it's in conflict. Conflict is the only place your brain can learn, right? And most of us enter conflict with certainty and with answers. So if Abby and I are in conflict, it's like her aim is to prove me wrong and to pull me towards her, and my aim is to prove her wrong and to pull her towards me. Notice that we set up conflict to learn, to win, but not learn. We only learn when we move. We never learn by standing still. And yet conflict is the only place you can actually move. So what would happen if we all practice every day entering conflict with yourself, with the world, with your partner, not with the intention of convincing the other, not to stand still, but to move, not necessarily towards them or away from, just away from where you are. Entering conflict with a question that seeks understanding rather than knowing, right? And so why understanding? Because understanding provides an intrinsic reward. And this is what we're going to finish with, right? Our greatest need. What is our greatest need? I want you to feel our greatest need. So I want you to stand up. We're going to conduct a piece of music together. All right? What is your greatest need? To be loved. But what is that, right? Right? Okay, let's try it, right? You all know this piece of music. Ready? Louder. Conduct it with me. I'm a terrible conductor. If I can do it, you can. You feel it growing? Now it's louder. Ready? Ready for it? It's coming. Ready? Our greatest need is closure. You can sit down. We've now closed. And that's why DJs work. Right? DJs ramp you up, ramp you up, ramp you up, and they drop the beat. Right? And that's because they're giving you closure. Your brain needs that closure. And understanding through conflict is what gives you closure. And when you get understanding, that's where actual healing lives. Healing lives in learning from what happened. You can't change what happened. You can change the meaning of what happened because your brain is a time machine. And when you get understanding from what happened, and especially if you're now able to change the life of someone else because of your understanding, that's actually where healing lives in your brain. So I'll leave you with that thought.